Here I am at my 6th-year transplant anniversary. I just went in the other day to my transplant cardiology, transplant team, had all my checks done, everything that I went through, and they found some real issues there. Mainly the fact that I'm dealing with some very, quote, severe. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community. Hey folks, today is it. Today happens to be May the 23rd, 2013. Therefore, it is my 6th-year heart transplant anniversary. Although this is a wonderful day for me, a day of celebration, a day of reflecting, remembering, a time when my life changed forever, a time when my life improved definitely for the better. It's also a day of commemoration, a day when I look back. I also have to reflect upon my donor, upon his life, upon the loss of his life, and particularly the gift of life that he gave. So I just want to say right out of the gate before I go any farther with this that I'm so thankful for the gift of life that was offered. If you're not already a registered organ donor, I want to encourage you to go ahead and do that. And a life like mine could be changed forever by your gift. And when you're doing that, be absolutely sure that you let your family, your friends, whoever's involved in your life know of your decisions so that if the time should come when the decision needs to be made, they'll know exactly what your wishes are. And so I just want to ask you to please pray for my donor family, particularly pray for his mom, Louise, for his sisters, Denise, Tracy, as well as Nancy. During this period of time, it's been a very difficult week for them, I know. I certainly love them to death. I'm so excited that I've been able to have a relationship with them. It's been such a gift to me. So to you, all the family, thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be a part of your lives in that way. But continue to lift them up and pray for them because, again, it has been a very difficult week for them. Now, as far as it being my 6th-year transplant anniversary, there's a whole lot that I could say. I actually thought about adding to the program I did last year on my 5-year transplant anniversary, adding a few points to that, letting you know what each year has been like, how things have gone, what a gift it's been. There's probably a place where that needs to exist. I may actually come back and do that here in a few days. If not, I'll have a link up here in the corners in the description below. You can go back and watch last year's video and then add to that the fact that this has certainly been a year, for me at least, of indebtedness where I really feel the debt that I owe to the entire community, especially to the donor families, not just to my donor, but all donor families, for the gift that they give. So that's kind of summary of what's going on there. Now, I have some problems right now, and really it's kind of the thing I really kind of struggled to decide whether or not I will talk about on the program, but I really think it could potentially help some of you. So I think it's good to say. And that is, here I am at my 6th-year transplant anniversary. I just went in the other day to my transplant cardiology, transplant team, had all my checks done, everything that I went through. And they found some real issues there. Mainly the fact that I'm dealing with some very, quote, severe aortic stenosis. Now, if you're not exactly familiar with what aortic stenosis is, that basically means that my aortic valve, which is the biggest, most important valve of the 4 that exist inside of my heart, is pretty much, it's on lockdown, okay? It doesn't function properly. Therefore, I don't get the great oxygenated blood that I've already had put through my lungs pumped back out to my body. So it causes some symptoms I may talk about later. But anyway, I'm a little bit symptomatic, not so much. This is a problem, however, that I've pretty much known about the whole time since transplant. As a matter of fact, it was right after my surgery when they came out to talk with my wife that they told her, the match was great, everything went smoothly, went perfectly, no issues there. But they made mention to her then that there was a problem with my donor's aorta, or aortic valve, I should say. And they didn't really go into detail. They just told her there was a problem, that one day it may have to be replaced. Now, through this 6 years, over and over, this issue has come up, but every time it's come up, it's been from the perspective of maybe one doctor walks in the room and says, okay, it's time, we need to replace it. And then the head of my cardiology team comes in the room and says, no, we have to pass that valve every time we do a cath or a biopsies and such. So we don't want to replace that yet. There's damage being done to that every time you pass through it. So let's not do anything yet because we're just going to tear that up. So they've put this off for a number of years, and albeit it's not really been that severe. But over the course of the last 2 years, particularly as I've gone in the transplant clinic, I have noticed them making note of how severe the stenosis is getting and how the problem with my valve has gotten worse. And they oftentimes ask a lot of questions about my symptoms. If I'm getting shortness of breath, if I'm getting dizzy or fainting spells, that sort of thing. And I haven't had that necessarily as of yet. I've had a few bumps in the road through the way, but necessarily not that. So it's kind of been a take it and then drop it type of discussion. Anyway, I go into the transplant clinic back on Monday, so just a few days ago, on May the 20th, I believe it was. I go into transplant clinic then. I immediately noticed some of the actions and reactions that are going on in the clinic. Mainly, number one, when I go into the echocardiogram, I noticed that the tech doing the echo is constantly repeating a few tests. Now, maybe if you've been through echocardiogram a number of times, you've noticed some of these tests, but you haven't understood them, such as them asking you why they've got the probe on to take several very deep breaths and hold them. You ever been through that? Yeah, probably you have. And typically when I go through an echocardiogram, they'll do that 3-4 times, and that's about it. They get the measurements they want, and they move on. Well, I noticed this day, I probably did that in excess of 10 times. So about 10 times, she's take a deep breath, hold it, and then release, and she's just checking and checking and checking. So I know there's a little bit of something she's looking for there, at least. Now, in addition to that, they oftentimes ask you to, and I just say it like they do, bear down like you're trying to poop, okay? They tell you just kind of bear down to push down, and while you're doing that, again, 3 or 4 times, they'll go through, they'll take some measurements, and they get, some numbers from that, whatever they were. This day, again, she probably had me do that in excess of 10 times. So I know that something is going on. I'm beginning to comprehend, understand that there may be some sort of an issue that at least she's noticed or has been instructed to look for. Okay. So I go through that. I know something's really going on there. As soon as I'm done with the echocardiogram, there was some lapse in there. I ended up going in to see the doctor. First thing, one of the fellows, which is what I call a junior doctor. They're great doctors. They're in training. Very, very good people, usually. Very friendly, that sort of thing. The fellow doctor comes in. He talks to me for a little bit for about, different issues. He actually takes his stethoscope out and begins to listen to my heart at that point. And he immediately says, "You do know you have a severe murmur, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always had a heart murmur. Yeah, I get it." Doesn't really give a lot of reaction to that other than to say, "Okay, let's get over here and see if we can look up your echocardiogram." So he looks it up. It's all computerized. It all comes up pretty quick. He looks it up on the screen. It's not there yet. The results are not there yet. So he says, "I tell you what, I'm going to go out, get either Dr. Talaj or Dr. Pambukin." That's two of the main, like head of the department doctors, which I often see. He said, "I'm going to go out and get them, and we'll be back in a minute." Well, he stays gone like 15, 20 minutes. I'm not exactly sure why. I've theorized now that they were probably just waiting on the echo results to post so they'd have some better ideas about what was going on. I don't know that, but they come in the room, Dr. Pambukin, which is just top notch. Just unbelievably great doctor. She's the one who really takes a stand for us as patients. She's your biggest cheerleader, but at the same time, she can be your biggest enemy, if you cross her path, because she's tough. She's hard-nosed. She comes in, she speaks for a moment, small talk, mentions this YouTube channel, tells me thank you for what I do, whatever, which I really appreciate, Dr. Pambukin, by the way. She makes mention of that, and then she turns and says, "Well, let's look and see what we can find on this echocardiogram." So I know she particularly is looking for it as well because that's all she's mentioned. She pulls it up on the screen and starts to mumble under her breath to the fellow that has come in the room with her. And I hear her use the word stenosis. And I know what stenosis is. I know my terms. I know that means a hardening or a stiffening of something, whatever it is. I couldn't hear very well. And she's turned to this computer screen now, so her back is inadvertently to me. And I lean in because I'm curious. I want to see what she's doing. She's reading a note is what she's doing. She reads a note and it says, aortic stenosis, and it gives some figures, some numbers, which I didn't actually have my right glasses on, so I couldn't see the detail of it. But anyway, she looks at that, then mumbles to the doctor again. She turns back around to me and she says, "I'm really concerned about the valve." She said there's some stenosis there, and we're concerned about it, but we're going to check it out tomorrow in the cath lab anyway. So let's just get a good look at that. Let's see how it goes. And she gets up, begins to examine me, and again, she seems to do a little bit different style of examination than before, the typical stuff, but she's really curious about the murmur sounds as well as the breath sounds. So I know something is up. She pretty much toward the end of the visit kind of plays it off, but I can tell she's concerned. And then she says this, which really caught my attention. She said, Mr. Merle, I'm going to go and look at the echo myself rather than just the results that some other doctor had posted there. She said, I'm going to go look at the echo myself and get a better grasp of what's going on, and we'll see you tomorrow in the cath lab. So I walk out then knowing, okay, something's wrong, something's not right. Come to the cath lab the next day. First one there, I beat everybody in the building, got signed in, registered by their computerized registration system. So I'm number one in line, and I know that, but I noticed pretty early that I'm not going back to the cath lab first. They're taking a few other patients ahead of me, finally gathered later that they knew that my cath would be more involved, so they're kind of getting people out of the way, so I'd be the last cath and they'd have time. But anyway, Dr. Roger Prater is another great doctor. She comes in and talks to me after they've got me prepped for the cath, and that's left and right heart cath, no biopsy. I don't have biopsies anymore, but left and right heart cath. She comes in and she mentions the valve 3 different times. She talks about checking the valve, getting measurements on the valve, getting an idea of what's going on with the valve. And so again, I know something's going on. So we get in the cath lab. I'm in the cath lab for about an hour and a half, so much longer than I've been in there before, for the most part. And they're really working. I can tell they're working there. They sedated me a good bit more than normal. I actually got 3 doses of sedative, if you will, a couple of different medications. But anyway, I'm not out. I'm aware, but I'm groggy for sure. But I can still tell what's going on. I can tell they're having difficulty passing that valve. Okay, and exactly a year ago, before that, the head transplant head of transplant, Dr. Jose Talaj, had difficulty passing the valve as well, and had made note of it and told me about it then, not explaining what the trouble was, just saying that he couldn't get past. So she's having trouble getting past it. She can't get around it. They're talking in what they think is code, this lingo, but I'm understanding it, and I'm hearing them. They're still talking about stenosis. They're still talking about the aortic valve. They're still talking about the problems with it. And I can hear some of that. And some of the techs, which work in the cath lab every day, they seem to know as much about the procedure itself as the doctors do. One of them starts to suggest, why don't we go in with this, and we'll put that, and you'll get through this way. And she said no. She said, go get Dr. Talaj now. And of course, I know if she's calling in reinforcements, particularly Dr. Talaj, which is a master pretty much in the cath lab and everywhere else, there's something up. So Dr. Talaj comes in. It doesn't take him but a minute, by the way, and he's all the way on the other side of the clinic. He comes in, he's popping gloves on, got everything, all the blue cloth, clothing on. He comes walking in the door. He typically is a real cut up, okay? He's not cutting up at all. He comes in the door, he grabs the equipment, the catheter. He says, how you doing, Mr. Merle? That's all he says. Then he turns around and starts to work. And he goes on and he works for a while. And over you can see him struggling. You can hear him mumbling under his breath, this and that. And then finally, I can see on the screens, which I can see all the screens over here to my left. I can see on the screen he's now past the aortic arch, and he's gotten down apparently through the valve. So he's starting to get some measurements. He calls for a lot of measurements, particularly a couple of measurements in particular when I can hear him, saying to the techs behind the glass, telling them, get me a good measurement here, give me this, give me that. And he gets the measurements he needs, and all of a sudden he pulls the gloves off, tosses them to the can over there beside him, and he turns and says, okay, we got what we need. And that's really what he's wanting to say. He's pretty much done talking at that point. Of course, I questioned him. I said, hey, Dr. Talaj, what's going on? And he turned to me and he paused for just a moment. And you could see him kind of we've been friends for a long time, okay? Me and Dr. Talaj have been together 12 plus years. I consider him an actual friend because we spend time together. He advises me. He helps me with some of the information I present here on this channel. So, we're close, at least to an extent. And he kind of swallows and he said, you have severe aortic stenosis. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, I know what that means. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means it's time. It's time to replace that valve, which again has come up before, but he's always been the guy that said, nah, no big deal. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay, by severe, what are we talking about? He said, I'm saying we got to replace the valve. We need to replace the valve as soon as possible. I'm going to refer you to the valve clinic. And UAB has a wonderful valve clinic, which replaces aortic and other valves. They do 800 of those, and so higher volume type thing. They're really specialized at what they do. Well, he finally, he just walks out of the room. The other doctors leave. The tech actually starts to encouraged me to move over to the gurney, and he starts to roll me out, and I realized he hadn't pulled the catheters out. The catheter's still in there. I said, hold up, you gonna take the catheter out? He said, no, we'll do that out in recovery. And I said, well, you usually take it out here. And he, no, we'll do that in recovery. He takes me out to recovery, gets me, kind of set up a little bit, goes and gets the nurse that's going to care for me, that sort of thing, and he doesn't pull the catheter. Well, he stays gone a few minutes, and then finally he comes back, and he said, okay, I talked with Dr. Talodge, we're going to pull the catheters. I don't know what Dr. Talodge's intentions were, if there were any, if he thought I may have to go back in, whatever, but they pull the catheter, he puts pressure on it. You know the drill, right? You've all been there. So he, gets that taken care of. In a minute, Dr. Roger Prayer comes in, which she's, again, very just awesome doctor. She comes in, and she's got this puzzled, saddened look. And she says, okay, you already heard what's going on. There's definitely going to have to be the valve replacement right here. I said, well, what's the outcome? And she said, well, if you don't do the valve replacement, then this could be your option, which I'll just say this, it's not good at all. Can put me back into complete congestive heart failure pretty quick, because if the valve is not functioning right and the blood is not being able to free flow back out through the body, if it's kind of a bottleneck area, then the muscle itself becomes thickened and enlarged, and you're back in the same boat. It really puts a lot of stress, particularly on that side of the heart. So I know the outcome. She knows the outcome. She says, we just need to get you in the valve clinic. Dr. Talodge is going to call the valve clinic himself. He'll get back with you on that. So she goes through a few more things. I ask her, how are we going to do this? She said, well, if you got enough calcium, which this seems backwards, but if you got enough calcification in the valve, then we may be able to do the transcatheter aortic valve replacement. If not, it'll be a full open heart. And of course, the difference between that, as a side note, maybe 3 to 5 days in the hospital versus 7 to 10 days, maybe 2-week recovery versus 2 months. And so I definitely don't want to be cracked open again. Again, you understand that. I've been there a few times in my life, and the most recent was a transplant. I just don't want to deal with that. You got scar tissue, just the whole issue that goes with that. So I don't want that. But she says, we'll just have to talk about it. We'll let the valve team help us to decide. And she again leaves the room there. A few minutes later, Dr. Talodge comes in. So anytime you got 2 to 3 doctors coming in and out, they're all saying the same thing, and they're all, really concerned looking, you got an issue. Dr. Talodge comes in. He goes through the same spiel, and he tells me, he said, Jim, I really, really want them to do this as, the transcatheter aortic replacement, but that may not be a possibility. I was a congenital patient, transplant patient, just a few more issues there. And he said, I just don't want to open you up, because if I open you up now for this, the valve replacement, and then I turn around and have to open you up later for something else, even as much as another transplant, I guess. If I open you up for that, then we got issues. We got too much scar tissue. We just don't want to do that. We hope they can do transcatheter, but that's their call. They're really good at what they do. They will help us make that decision. Whether we, what we do, you always hear pig valve. There's pig valve, cow valve, actually, or total mechanical. They'll help us make all those calls. So just wait and see them. And I said, well, what kind of time frame are we talking about? And he said, we're talking about now. I said, like, today? No, not today, but as in, like, you will probably receive a call this week and have to get that done. So that throws a kink in my life, because things have rocked on. I'm really not that symptomatic, and I do have some difficulty, shortness of breath when I go up inclines or stairs. I do have some dizzy, lightheaded spells, which I hadn't really related to that. I've got other issues, my vision. I've talked about that before. But, I hadn't related all this yet. And I'm usually the guy who's putting it all together, but I hadn't put all this together yet. But he tells me, you know what, they'll get in touch with you. They'll help us decide, yada, yada. So he leaves the curtain. And I won't keep going on this. I know it's been a long time, but they come back a few more times and they keep discussing this. I got home yesterday. My actual recovery from the cath was probably better than average, especially considering how long I was, there, how much sedation they gave me because of what they were having to do. Actually pretty good. I feel okay right now. I'm obviously, I'm here. But the valve clinic called a few minutes ago, and May the 28th, which is next Tuesday, they're going to have me in to do basically an overview or review of my whole case. Sit down with me. The two doctors, there's two main doctors that do that. I'm going to get to meet both of them at the same time, help to make that decision. So I'm going to have to go with this. I don't have an option. So if you hear the word stenosis, I would encourage you to perk up, okay, pay attention. Now, honestly, there's nothing I could have done about this. It was inherited from my donor. It's been an issue the whole time. It's just worsened, okay? And it's going to worsen, whether it be just with age. And by the way, typically this happens to people who are 65, 70 years or older, but, particularly because of age. It could be because of a few other factors. In this case, we're not sure because it was a donor issue, but I've inherited it and it's worsened. My body hadn't fixed it, and it can't be fixed really from that perspective, but I've just got to do the best I can. I got to take care of myself. I got to make sure I don't have any other issues, especially take care of my other organs. Got to fight through this. Just like with my liver issues, I've got cirrhosis of the liver from medications I've mentioned a few times before. Yeah, I got to deal with that. And so I'm looking to deal with this. And I think it's going to be difficult, maybe not impossible. I didn't want to face this. I certainly didn't want to face this right now, but it's got to be dealt with. So if you hear stenosis, if you hear problems with anything, question, okay? I could have easily, especially with some of that jargon that was going on in the cath lab, I could have easily missed this and not really understood what was going on, but I have a little bit of a grasp, and I've tried to educate myself. So that's what I always try to do here on these programs, is to educate you all as well. And I'm thankful for your support. I'm asking right now, I'm asking for your prayers, because this is not what I wanted to face. And depending on how this valve replacement goes, it could definitely change the outcome of the rest of my life. Hopefully it will for the good. This may be a point that I never felt. I had a failing heart before. I was congenital. Then I received a heart with a somewhat defective valve, so I've never felt perfect. This may be a breaking point where things get better. We'll just have to see, but I've got to really take care of things. And this is important because this could lead very quickly to, a decline in my health, potentially heart failure, and put me back in the same boat. So, some of you have been there. I've already met with some of you that have been down this road multiple times. It's not easy, but we get to work together on it. So I covet your prayers. Thank you so much for that again. Backing up to the beginning, my transplant anniversary is a time of celebration, but also commemoration and appreciation for my donors. So to Dickie's family, all of you, Miss Louise, all of you, I love you, and please pray for them. It is a difficult it's a difficult time of year. It is. And, it just is. I'm thankful that I've been able to be a part of their lives, and maybe I've given them some comfort, but it's a difficult time. So anyway, health update. Probably none of you watched this to the end. That's okay. If you did, thank you for that. Thank you especially for that. But I covet your prayers. And until next time, each of you, please, like always, stay stronger, my friends.